Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Blue Bounty Hunter channel. And today in this video, I'm going to be talking about why I think The Last Jedi is the best of the three movies that make up the Star Wars sequel trilogy. More specifically, I'll be going into why I think the middle film succeeds where the other two fail. Now before I get started, I just want to say that all three movies in this trilogy are very controversial, especially The Last Jedi, and I just want to put out that everything I say in this video is just my opinion, and I'm not claiming it to be factual or objectively correct by any means. So I thought I'd start off this video by talking about why I don't like The Force Awakens and why I think it doesn't work as a movie. And my biggest problem with The Force Awakens is just that it really is like a copy of Episode 4, A New Hope in a lot of ways. It's basically just like A New Hope, but without all of the charm and good characters. I think one of the biggest problems this movie has is when it introduces Rey, and this is going to be something that I'm going to be talking about a lot in this video, and that is the character of Rey. I mean, it makes sense. She is the main character of the trilogy. So to all the Rey haters out there, don't worry, I'm pretty much one of you. You're probably not going to like this video because I'll be talking about her a lot. Honestly, like, of the three movies, I wouldn't say Rey is that bad in this movie, but I also don't think this is like the best one that she's in. She does have a little bit of a personality in this movie, but for the most part, she really doesn't do all that much in this movie. She's kind of just there and happens to be really powerful, but we're not giving any reason, to be honest. Now, one thing I do want to put out there is, while I don't like The Force Awakens as a movie, and I do consider it to be one of the bad movies of this trilogy, I do like it better than The Rise of Skywalker. And honestly, I think the big reason I like this movie better than The Rise of Skywalker is because it actually feels like they cared a little bit, and it does feel like they kind of tried. I mean, I don't like this movie that much, but I will say it was a very good theater experience, and I remember everybody at the time was very excited for it when it came out in 2015. Now, even though I do think the movie is pretty well made and does feel like people generally cared about it, besides the big problem of it being a copy of A New Hope, it also does a really bad job of kind of explaining where things in the galaxy are going. And let me explain myself. Obviously, at the end of Return of the Jedi, the Rebellion won, they defeated the Empire, and basically, you know, the Star Wars saga had ended there. But this movie basically just says all that doesn't matter anymore because the First Order is back, which is basically just the Empire, and the Resistance is fighting them, which is basically just the Rebellion. And it really just does a poor job of explaining how we got here and like what's going on, so you're kind of just thrown into this world without any explanation as to who is who and what's happening. And another big problem with this is that when you finally get to Luke Skywalker, you just have no clue what he's doing in the story, and they don't explain it at all. And then they just leave it on a cliffhanger without explaining anything. And it's just kind of pointless, the movie feels like, because you don't care about the characters because you don't know how they got there or really what's going on. And when I mentioned this movie is almost just a pure copy of A New Hope, I was not kidding. I mean, the first scene is like an action scene with some stormtroopers and some, you know, people resisting them, just like at the beginning of A New Hope. And then it moves into a droid character falling into the hands of the main character on a desert planet, that being Jakku in this movie. And then after that, they meet Han Solo and Chewbacca, just like in A New Hope. And then they go to Starkiller Base, and they spend most of the second half of the film on Starkiller Base. I mean, it literally is, like, page to page, just a complete, uninspired copy of A New Hope. And it's really confusing because on one hand, if they were just trying to like honor the original movie and just kind of trying to do like a retelling of it, that'd be cool. But it's so confusing because this movie basically is like trying to be exactly like that movie while also trying to be as different from it as possible with all the new characters and stuff. So it just creates this really confusing vibe that I just never really fell in love with. But all things considered, this movie definitely could be worse. I don't like it that much, and I definitely don't think it's the best movie of the trilogy, but they did get a couple things right. Now, moving into the middle movie of the trilogy, that of course being The Last Jedi that this video is actually about. I have liked The Last Jedi ever since I first saw it in the theaters, and to be honest, I liked it a lot more back then, because back then I really liked the sequels, and since then I've kind of thought about them more, and now I don't like most of the sequels, but I do still like this movie. And I kind of want to explain why I think this movie kind of works where the other two don't. I think the biggest thing that just makes me love this movie is I love movies in general. You know, I love Star Wars, it's my favorite series, and I love the expanded universe and the lore and all that stuff, but I also just really like the movies. It helps this movie a lot to say like it is really well directed and really well made. I think Rian Johnson is a great director and a great filmmaker. You could argue that maybe he didn't take the story in the best direction, but like even besides that, this is just a good movie in of itself. Like, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, the visual effects are amazing in this movie, and it's shot very well. And yeah, I just want to say it's so well directed, and that's one of my favorite things about this movie. And while I do think The Force Awakens is relatively well made, the same cannot be said for The Rise of Skywalker, which honestly just looks like a mess with all the colors and random things going on there. So yeah, I don't think The Rise of Skywalker is really well made at all, to be honest. But The Last Jedi is really well made, and a lot of people make the argument that this movie is a good movie, but not a good Star Wars movie, and I can kind of see what they're saying, but at the same time, I honestly think this is also a good Star Wars movie because it has like all the action and the space battles, and it really builds the characters and the mythology, and it does something interesting with the story that the other two sequel films don't. And to me, that makes it more like a better Star Wars movie than the other two, because in a lot of ways it feels like a George Lucas movie to some degree, because Rian Johnson actually takes the story in a new and interesting direction instead of just doing the same thing we always see in these movies. So to me, it feels like more Star Wars than the other two sequels as it is. And then just talking about like the plot of the movie, one thing I like about it is they give Poe Dameron more to do in the movie. Also, Finn, a lot of people have argued that the Canto Bight story is pointless and doesn't really work. And while I do think it's probably the worst part of the movie, I also think it is not that bad, because I like it when the Star Wars movies kind of split up the characters and have a bunch of different storylines going on at the same time. I think it makes the movie more interesting, and also it is pretty important to the plot because they need to get the code breaker to get into Snoke's ship and save the fleet. So yeah, also in the movie, I like the Rey and the Luke part. I think most people's problem with this movie at the end of the day is the direction they went with Luke Skywalker. And while I definitely understand why some people don't like that, I kind of like where they went with his character, because it's almost giving the story of like people in general aren't perfect, and it kind of portrays Luke as someone that made a mistake and then he just like really regrets it. And I don't know, I just like the direction they took the character. I think it was interesting. And my big problem with people hating on Luke in this movie is that they say, oh, he's not a hero anymore. The Luke from the original trilogy, he wouldn't do that. But at the end of the day, he ends up redeeming himself and saving the Resistance at the Battle of Crate, because if you remember, he delays Kylo Ren from capturing the Resistance and destroying the Resistance. So in a lot of ways, he does redeem himself and save the day at the end of the movie. So I've never really understood the Luke complaints. I mean, I get some people just really didn't like how he acted in the movie, but my big thing is, even if you don't like the direction they took him, he does end up redeeming himself at the end. So I think at least they did that right, for sure. And then the final thing about this movie that I want to talk about is I just really like what they did with Kylo Ren in this movie. In The Force Awakens, Kylo Ren is kind of just like this cool bad guy that's kind of in the background, and you know, he's nice, but he's also kind of just there. And then in The Rise of Skywalker, it was honestly kind of a confusing mess what they did with Kylo Ren, because the whole movie, he's just like this guy that, you know, hates Rey and everything and just wants to kill Rey. But then at the end of the movie, he randomly turns back into Ben Solo, so that it just didn't really make much sense the way they wrote his character in that movie. But in my opinion, I actually really like the direction they went with Kylo Ren in this movie, because first of all, you have the whole storyline with him and Rey kind of being a dyad in the Force, which the only thing I can really credit The Rise of Skywalker for is they at least continued that storyline, which I guess is cool. But yeah, no, Kylo Ren in this movie is really interesting. I like that storyline, and then I also him turning on Snoke and then helping Rey, but then his final decision is to become the supreme leader and destroy the Resistance. I just found him very interesting and well written in this movie, and he just really compelled me. This was honestly the movie that got me to like his character a lot, and in my opinion, he is the best thing to come out of the Disney sequel trilogy. And also that throne room scene with the guards and everything, I just have to say that was a dope and well-directed scene. But that's it for The Last Jedi. But The Rise of Skywalker, I do think it is the worst of the three. I think it's kind of with The Force Awakens as being one of the bad movies in the trilogy, in my opinion. And it really just is a confusing, rushed mess all around. I mean, the other two movies, they were like working on them since like 2013 and stuff. And then I'm pretty sure they just threw together this movie in the last like 2 years before it came out. So it did feel very rushed. Also, I really hate what they did with Palpatine. I don't know, it just felt very lazy, and like they couldn't come up with a good villain for the end of the trilogy, so they just threw him in there for fan service. I didn't like it that much. Also, I don't like what they did with Kylo Ren in this movie. Don't get me wrong, the Ben Solo stuff at the end was pretty cool, but for the majority of this movie, Kylo Ren is just kind of there. He doesn't really have anything going on. He's kind of just like killing people, and it just feels very pointless to me in this movie. And then also Rey in this movie is just like unbearable, if I'm being honest. Like she's just angry at everyone, including herself, and she just, I don't know, I didn't like her in this movie that much. And then also just like from a directing standpoint, it's not shot well. Doesn't look very good. All the colors don't match. It's just like a bunch of blues and greens and you know, orange and stuff. It just doesn't look very good together, in my opinion. So yeah, I don't really like this movie that much. If you like it, that's fine. But I do think it was kind of the most poorly written and directed of the three, and I just don't really like where they ended the trilogy. Now, before I end the video, I just want to give a few reasons why I think The Last Jedi really succeeds where the other two movies fail. And first of all, I do think it was really well directed and it just looks really good, so that's cool. And then also, one reason I like The Last Jedi a lot is because I feel like the movie ends up coming with an interesting and compelling storyline, and it fills in all of the blanks, and it takes what the last movie gave it, which was basically nothing, and it does something cool with it. So that's one reason I like it a lot. And then on top of that, the reason The Rise of Skywalker doesn't work is because The Last Jedi honestly gave that movie a lot to work with. You know, it has the end of the movie with, okay, the Resistance has escaped and they're looking for allies, and, you know, Kylo Ren is supreme leader and he's trying to kill them. Like, it had all these interesting things that they could have worked with, and to me, they just kind of ruined all of the established story arcs and stuff that were set up in that movie, and they just, I don't know, it's just kind of a confusing mess that really didn't do anything with what it was given. But anyway, that's it for this video. You can subscribe if you want to. I upload every Sunday at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, see ya.